Well, my circle of competence, which has grown to some degree, but circle of competence is the area in which certain kinds of industries, for example, I can understand the future economics of. Other kinds of industries, I can't, and I have to know where the perimeter of that circle is. Now, over the years, I may be able to enlarge the circle somewhat, but the circle never gets to be all-encompassing. And Tom Watson Sr., who built IBM, said, "I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots." Well, he was talking about a circle of competence.
Every few years, it seems, a news report on a person who usually fits this description appears. You have someone who led a pretty ordinary life and worked in a job that is quite typical, like a supermarket staff or mailman. They finally pass away after working for many years and leading a pretty regular life. And while their loved ones are dealing with their assets, they find an unexpected revelation. What they discover is that their loved one, whom they thought was a textbook example of a normal human being, was actually concealing a major secret from everyone. As it turned out, their loved one who had died had been making a fortune in the stock market. The typical employee who earned a pitiful income and wasn't a banker or financial analyst. Throughout the course of their life, they made a lot of money, in some cases, millions of dollars. These sorts of tales are motivating because they show that no matter where you are in life, as long as you work hard, you can always improve your financial status. Having a $1 million stock portfolio is still attainable, no matter how far away it might appear. While these people are discussed in several books, blogs, and YouTube videos, many of them fail to mention one of the most crucial aspects that contributed to their ability to amass enormous fortune through the stock market. Ronald Reed is undoubtedly one of the most well-known characters in these tales. Ronald, who died in 2014 at the age of 92, was remembered as a quiet, thrifty individual who didn't seem to have much money. By all accounts, he was a fairly regular person who enjoyed cutting wood in his spare time and drove used automobiles. He was the first person in his family to ever complete high school, and subsequently he obtained a job at a gas station as an attendant. He worked on vehicles for over 25 years until switching to a part-time janitorial position at J.C. Penney, where he remained until 1997. He was noted for having a strong work ethic despite originating from a low-income home, and enjoyed studying by reading books at his neighborhood library. Ronald had acquired a fortune of over $8 million in the stock market over the course of his life, which his family members were horrified to learn after his death. Ronald gave $2 million to his stepchildren and friends, $4.8 million to his neighborhood hospital, and $1.2 million to the library he frequently visited. He also donated $1 million to the library. The tale of Ronald was reported by major news organizations, and his legacy is now the subject of several books, blogs, and videos on this website. People enjoy hearing this motivating tale because it demonstrates that anybody can achieve financial success in life if they put discipline, frugality, and a willingness to learn about investment into practice. Yet one aspect of Ronald's narrative that is sometimes ignored is how he was able to choose his assets. What did Ronald invest in specifically to build up such a sizable portfolio? Ronald would not, in the words of his lawyer, invest in any speculative stocks, tech firms, or anything else he felt like. He did not comprehend it well enough.
So understanding the economic characteristics of a business is different than predicting the fact that an industry is going to do wonderfully. And so when I look at the internet businesses, or I look at tech businesses, I say this is a marvelous thing, and I love to play around on the computer, and now I order my books from Amazon and all kinds of things, but I don't know who's going to win. And unless I know who's going to win, I'm not interested in investing. I'll just play around on the computer. And defining your circle of competence is the most important aspect of investing. It's not how important, how large your circle is. You don't have to be an expert on everything. But knowing where the perimeter of that circle of what you know and what you don't know is, and staying inside of it, is all important.
Ronald's success as an investor was largely due to his emphasis on dividends. He allegedly stated that he would not buy any stock that did not regularly pay dividends to stockholders, and that dividends were extremely important to Mr. Reed. Ronald was familiar with the impacts of the dividend snowball despite not having had access to a computer for the most of his life. Dividends made up almost 84% of the S&P 500's total return between 1960 and 2021. You can clearly see how greatly your overall return would change. If you factor in dividend reinvestment. If you invested $10,000 in the S&P 500, you would receive $4.9 million in return. If your dividends were not taken into account, you would have received just $0.8 million as opposed to zero. Moreover, dividends can ensure that your assets generate income even when the stock market is stagnant. This was the situation in the 1970s, and as you can see, the stock market endured a protracted period of stagnant stock prices. Although while the market would always rise in value over time, the 1970s were actually a lost decade of growth. Indeed, 73% of the stock market's total gains for the decade came from dividends during this period. There was a time between the late 1960s and the early 1980s when most equities didn't experience significant share price rise, yet dividends allowed millions of investors generate consistent profits.
If I were retired, I had say, $1 million portfolio of stocks that was paying me $30,000 a year in dividends or something of the sort, and my children had grown, the house was paid off and everything. I wouldn't worry too much about having a lot of cash around.
Although Ronald Reed's situation may seem singular, there are many more instances of persons who prioritized dividends and built substantial fortune. Louis David Zager left over $18 million behind when he passed away in 2014 while residing in a rent-controlled apartment in New York. According to rumors, he got so many dividend payments that in his latter years, he was well known for indulging on opulent shopping sprees and for regularly traveling the globe. Despite having a higher level of education than Ronald Reed, he was aware of the benefits of living off profits. He was a total disaster at home, yet in a strange sense you might say he led a fruitful life. Homeless Kurt Diggerman gathered bottles and cans for recycling for more than 30 years. When he had enough money from recycling to cover the minimal necessities, he would put it in the stock market after learning about it from books he read at his local library. Many were startled to find that his portfolio was worth more than $1.4 million when he passed suddenly at the age of 60. Despite being unemployed, having dropped out of school, and dependent on recycling to make a living. It's a rare instance of extreme frugalness to have someone who refused to pay the money necessary to live indoors, even if he had the option to do so at some point in his life. The reality is that millions of investors depend on dividends every day for their returns. Among the most common investment vehicles, index funds and mutual funds included in 401k plans both provide dividends to shareholders. People who quickly made a lot of money by pursuing a higher risk form of investing, like using a lot of leverage, or the day trader who used technical analysis to make the perfect entry into an investment and then exited at the perfect time, are often glamorized by the media. Other people who have made millions by investing in one particular holding that has experienced extreme growth are also frequently highlighted. Most people who gain a significant amount of money quickly on the stock market are virtually always gambling or speculating, or they are unable to regularly replicate their performance. Moreover, there are many who assert that they have been outperforming the market for many years, and in some cases even decades. It's sometimes quite challenging to corroborate their assertions. And those who have succeeded in doing so are already known to us. One such person is the well-known fund manager Peter Lynch, who over a 13-year period produced average yearly returns of 29.2%. Another well-known example of an investor who was able to outperform the market for several years is Stanley Druckenmiller. I'm not suggesting it's impossible to utilize a lot of leverage or make a ton of money on excellent, speculative ventures. Yet, statistically speaking, there is little chance that everybody who watches this video will be able to accomplish something similar. The top stock pickers in the world tend to be those that invest for an extended period of time in dividend-paying stocks and funds. Even index fund investors may appreciate dividend reinvestment for their overall gains. If we take a long-term look at SPY, an S&P 500 index fund, we can see that dividends account for a significant portion of its entire performance. If you didn't reinvest your dividends, your annual return would have been 1% lower on average. On top, you can see how your dividend returns were reinvested into purchasing further shares of SPY. Although a 1% difference might not seem like much, it translates in an extra $27,600 in returns over the course of 28 years. You would probably not do too badly with a $10,000 investment, am I right? Based on what we have examined. The pursuit of dividend investments, in my opinion, is what formed some of the greatest investors in history. Even Warren Buffett, the most successful investor in history, invests heavily in dividend-paying equities. And this is particularly encouraging because it demonstrates that anybody can develop really large amounts of money in the stock market, You don't need a PhD, a degree in finance, or to come from a very affluent family. We all have access to the same information. In our lifetimes, we can accumulate an absurd quantity of wealth. We don't require the expensive machinery that major banks utilize. If you haven't begun investing yet, you should do it as soon as possible because doing so will enable you to compound your money for even longer periods of time. Constantly diversify your assets to protect yourself, and unless you truly need the money or are financially independent, always reinvest your earnings. Check out some of the other videos on my channel if you like. I want to thank everyone for viewing today's video. If you'd like to see more stuff like this, don't hesitate to subscribe. I want to thank everyone once more for watching.